llorar. A un brujo que es doctor, mi amor, le fui a contar. Y el brujo dijo: Juan, te voy a contestar, favor de al brujo confesé tu infidelidad, al brujo confesé tu insinceridad. Y el brujo dijo: Juan, te voy a contestar, favor de tú decías ver, pero jamás decías cuando venías de mi pobre corazón. Y tuve que cruzar los 7 mares preguntando,
Y el brujo sí me dio la solución.
mi amigo el brujo fue y me dijo cómo hacer. Mi amigo el brujo fue y me dijo cómo hablar. El pobre infeliz ahorita es un poco a favor de tú decías bien, pero jamás decías cuando
Te rías de mi pobre corazón sonte.
y tuve que cruzar los 7 mares preguntando, y el brujo al fin me dio la solución. Chan, 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 chan. Proyecto Day.
A un brujo que es doctor, mi amor, le fui a contar. A un brujo que es doctor, mi amor, le fui a llorar. Y el brujo dijo: Chan, te voy a contestar, favor de
Tú decías bien, pero jamás decías cuando morías de mi pobre corazón. Y tuve que cruzar los 7 mares preguntando, y el brujo al fin me dio la solución. Oh yeah.
Al brujo confesé tu infidelidad. Al brujo confesé tu insinceridad. Que el brujo dijo: Juan, te voy a contestar, favor de
cool too. I'm singing in convoy. Okay, let's go. I think he probably thinks I said no. Leaving.
arrived at your destination.
Ooh, just show my ass.
In 400 yards, turn right.
Es morir de amor,
Turn
morir de
right.
amor por dentro. Es quedarme sin
Recalculating
tú,
route.
es perderte en un momento. ¿Cómo puedo yo decirte que lo siento? Que tu ausencia es mi dolor, que yo sin tu amor me muero. Morir de amor, despacio y en silencio sin saber si todo lo que he dado te llegó a tiempo. Morir de amor, que no morirse solo en desamor y no tener un nombre que decirle al viento. Yo no sé muy bien
corazón, no me mires. Tu mirada tierna me enloquece. Ese tu mirar se parece al radiante sol que amanece. Miente, miente en tus ojitos, mira, mira tan bonitos.
Y mi corazón se hace pedacito. Y mi corazón se hace pedacito.
Miente, miente en tus ojitos, mira, mira tan bonitos.
Y mi corazón se hace pedacito. Y mi corazón se hace pedacito.
¡Cumbia hasta el lunes! Pero tu mentira es la noche, oscuridad llena de reproche. Ojitos mentirosos, no me mires. Tu mirada tierna me enloquece. Miente, miente en tus ojitos, mira, mira tan bonitos.
Y mi corazón se hace pedacito. Y mi corazón se hace pedacito.
Miente, miente en tus ojitos, mira, mira tan bonitos.
Y mi corazón se hace pedacito. Y mi corazón se hace pedacito.
Vaya con esa cumbia, caballero. Ojitos mentirosos, no me mires. Tu mirada tierna me enloquece. Ese tu mirar se parece al radiante sol que amanece. Miente, miente en tus ojitos, mira, mira tan bonitos.
Y mi corazón se hace pedacito. Y mi corazón se hace pedacito.
Miente, miente en tus ojitos, mira, mira tan bonitos.
Y mi corazón se hace pedacito. Y mi corazón se hace pedacito.
Miente, miente en tus ojitos, mira, mira tan bonitos.
this again. Wait.
Welcome back, Stig.
When I first played The Witcher 3, I thought I had the full measure of what it was capable of after a dozen or so hours of playtime, but then I reached Novigrad and it kind of blew my mind. I had played plenty of massive open world games by that point in my life, but while some had incredible and expansive wilds to journey across and others had dense and detailed cities to explore, I never played one that did both convincingly. In the ones that tried to, the cities never felt realistic. For instance, take Skyrim. While each of the cities are intriguing and impressive in terms of theming and visual design, they don't really feel like proper cities. They are far too small and singular in focus, and their populations are minuscule, with each city having the amount of people you'd historically expect to find in a small village and not a place with a fortified keep. I don't know, like when Nazim asks if you've been to the Cloud District lately, it's a bit baffling because how could you not, as there is barely any separation between it and the rest of Whiterun. Now, the choice to have smaller cities makes sense given the general design goals of Skyrim. They want you to feel like you can interact with anyone and anything, and creating bigger cities where most of the inhabitants and buildings largely act as set dressing would take away that aspect of the game. Also, trying to scale the cities to something that more closely resembled reality probably would have broken Skyrim's engine irrevocably. Regardless of it being the right choice for the game, it does still have the effect of making the world feel smaller in a way. It makes it all the more obvious that it is just a representation of a city and not an actual one. Novigrad, however, really feels like a city. There are people everywhere you look, all going about their business, and more often than not, it isn't them just doing one task in one place for all time. They move around, they seemingly have schedules and jobs and important places to be. Along with that, there are more buildings than you can reasonably keep track of, the majority of which tower over you, making it feel like the city is a world of its own. It can't be understood in just one glance and is as easy to get lost within as the vast marshes and mountains of the world outside of the walls. Novigrad feels alive. There is an energy to it that's undeniable and makes the game far richer because of it. The city matches the scale of the rest of the world, and the way it operates, as well as the fact that it exists within a larger context, provides a sort of realism to it. There's a sense that it could be a real city in a real world. Now, of course, in reality, it couldn't and it isn't meant to be. Major cities are made to accommodate hundreds of thousands of people, and they require countless considerations in order to build something that supports those who reside within it simultaneously. In games, however, the design goal generally is to support just one person, the player. The infrastructure of a video game city doesn't need to provide anything for anyone living in it because their needs don't exist. It doesn't matter that new ships will never come into Novigrad's harbor, or that these carts in Assassin's Creed 2 are always stationary, or that the power lines in Liberty City don't really make any sense. Although it does make for a fire Any Austin video. Actually, in that video, he makes a point about how video games are top-down representations of real spaces. The aim of developers is to capture a vibe, not create a functional space, so they aren't focused on creating practical cities. They're focused on creating something that feels close enough. We use the word simulation a lot when talking about video games, but with the exception of stuff like City Skylines, the vast majority of video game cities aren't truly simulations, they're simulacrums. A word I only know from Dungeons & Dragons and therefore am almost certainly missing its full philosophical context. They're imitations that don't have the components to truly operate, but when viewed from a certain perspective, they are able to convincingly fake it. Novigrad is not a functioning city, however it has all the trappings of one that is, making it extremely easy to suspend disbelief and feel that sense of immersion we so often hope to find in games. This illusion only takes a tiny amount of investigation to shatter though. If you spend time following different people in the city, you'll find that each is not an individual, they are an archetype. One who is assigned a zone to operate within and then move around interacting with environmental prompts that align with whatever their assigned tasks are. She'll clean clothes in any wash tub she comes across, he'll pick up boxes to take from one spot to another, he'll count the inventory of every pile of stuff he sees, but there is no rhyme or reason for any of it. Doing these things doesn't give them new clothes to wear or earn them money to help support their lifestyle or change the resources the city has, because why would it? Who cares about a nameless NPC's ability to meaningfully change their life? What does matter is that at a glance, it seems as if whatever they're doing could, and in all likelihood, you'll only ever give them a glance. In the game, you're a witcher and have better things to do than watch this guy saw this piece of wood without ever making progress. You've got a daughter to find and monsters to slay, so while you may take a moment to appreciate the moving pieces of the city, the game is designed in a way where you're most likely just going to run by these people, because what you have going on is more important and interesting than any single person's mundane life here. The game doesn't need to do anything more because all that matters is that it adds to the player's sense that this could be a real place, giving more weight to the aspects of the gameplay and story that actually do matter to them. When Ciri feels like a missing part of a place with a sense of life to it, it makes finding her feel even more important. Designing a city in a way that enhances the player's experience obviously goes beyond how it operates or seems to operate. It also can be seen in its layout. Historically, major cities in the real world sprung up near various water sources that best allowed for agriculture and trade, and then had to take the natural environment into account when developing their infrastructure. In games though, devs aren't having to figure out how to build around the natural landscape. They're making the landscape. Every aspect can be developed together to match the architect's vision and not have to compromise to account for reality. The existence of a river might be used in the lore to justify why a city is there, but the actual reason is to give the player something to interact with. So whether it be Novigrad's rivers, terrain, or placement of buildings, they all exist for the player and have the dual purpose of seeming like a plausible feature while also being engaging to play around. Now this can all be a hard line to walk, especially when certain goals may be at odds with one another. For instance, it seems pretty clear that CD Projekt Red wanted Novigrad to feel like a maze of a city that anyone could get lost in, but at the same time, as the game puts a lot of emphasis on exploration, they almost certainly wanted it to feel navigable as to not create constant friction for players whenever they tried to go from one spot of the city to another. Depending on the quests the player pursues and choices they make, they can spend an inordinate amount of time in just the city alone, so making sure that moving through it didn't feel worse than moving through any other area of the game mattered a fair bit. To their credit, as confusing as Novigrad may seem at first, it is one of the few areas in The Witcher 3 where I feel like not using a minimap is extremely viable, and this is done through the inclusion of clever landmarks and terrain that help guide players. For instance, a few branches of the Pontar River cut through Novigrad in different ways, creating distinct sections of the city. To the south are the docks and various gang-controlled neighborhoods. In the center is the Market District, which is also alongside some gang-controlled neighborhoods. And to the north is Temple Isle, which is controlled by the worst gang of them all, the Church of Eternal Fire. There's a lot of space to get lost within, but the various water features around Novigrad tend to make it easy to get your bearings. Finding the lower river gives you a straight shot to the docks and out of the city. It is also right by Hierarch Square, which is where many shops and quests are based out of. Following the coast gives an easy path through the docks and also to St. Gregory's Bridge, which can take you to Temple Isle, and even when further away from the bay, the sails of the ships docked in the harbor can be spotted from many different places across the city, giving players an easy way to orient themselves when feeling a bit lost. As for how it uses the terrain, there are exceptions to this, but generally when going north, the elevation increases, and when going south, it decreases. I imagine this choice stems from how we tend to associate north with up and south with down, so having that reflected in the topography feels pretty natural, or maybe I've just spent too much time thinking about this. They also tie different social classes to the various elevations, with the upper class being at the top of the hill and the lower class being at the bottom. This has a fair bit of historical basis, as nobles and royalty were often settled at the top of hills as they offered more protection from potential attacks, but here it mostly serves to further create a distinction between the various spots in the city. Quest design even plays a role in making the city more manageable to navigate by having the starting locations for main quests and major side quests all be pretty easy to keep track of. You can pretty much draw a straight line from the Rosemary and Thyme to Hierarch Square to Sigismund's Bathhouse to the Passiflora, and these are all places that are extremely significant to the story being told. While there are tons of streets that weave through the city, many end up funneling players down this line through the center of Novigrad, so if you can just have an understanding of that line, you'll typically be able to figure out where to go without needing to overly rely on your minimap. Of course, some players still will just focus on their minimap, but those who don't or even have it turned off completely won't really be that disadvantaged for it. Now, the inclusion of these aspects don't mean that players will never get lost or struggle to find a location, but the general layout and the natural guides the city provides likely will lessen how often it happens. These aspects aren't necessarily things you will actively think of when traversing the city, but they can be felt, and this sort of subtle approach can have a huge impact on how comfortable a player feels within a space. Novigrad Novigrad's clever design leads to a city that not only feels lived in, but feels lived in by you. And by the end of your quest to find Ciri within it, it goes from a city you thought you'd never understand to one you largely do. I think it's worth mentioning that despite being an entirely fictional city, Novigrad does take cues from real medieval ones, and its similarity to them kind of provides a level of legitimacy. And some titles take this even a step further by being set in real-world locations. In Assassin's Creed 2, for instance, Ubisoft constructed mildly faithful recreations of famous cities like Florence and Venice. The layout of the land is mostly the same, and they contain many real-world buildings that the game regularly points out to the player and provides information on. And this gives a sort of validity to the city as a whole, almost like if these buildings are right, then the others must be as well. And of course, that's not really the case. The buildings that fill in the rest of the city are plausible, but not accurate. Doing a perfect one-to-one recreation of what a city looked like over 500 years ago would be impossible, and more importantly, it wouldn't support the main goal of the game, which is to make Ezio's climbing and free running feel as fun and interesting as they can. Everything is scaled so the player always has an opportunity to make a daring escape or an undetected approach. Buildings tend to be perfect jumping distances from each other, windows and other ornamentations are spaced at just the right distance to almost never halt Ezio in his tracks, and of course, hay bales are never far from the highest lookouts in the city. It shows off just enough from reality to make the city believable, but then every aspect of how it operates, from the people walking around who you can blend in with to scaffolding that helps you get from the street level to the rooftops, is in service of the gameplay. Another more modern example of this can be seen in Grand Theft Auto 5 with Los Santos. Now, while it is inspired by Los Angeles, Los Santos is clearly a fictional place. It has plenty of notable LA landmarks that even people who have never been there would recognize, but it isn't worried about presenting them faithfully, giving Rockstar more freedom with how they structure every bit of the city. In fact, they also do a lot to change up the terrain, and it actually uses the same elevation trick as Novigrad, where, at least in the city proper, going uphill tends to take you north and to richer areas, where going downhill brings you south into lower income parts of the city. A technique Rockstar seems to be somewhat fond of, as it can also be seen with Saint Denis in Red Dead Redemption 2. Regardless, the inclusion of aspects that many people see every day, whether it be in person or in film or television, provides a familiarity to the city that makes it more believable, but then everything else is meant to improve the gameplay. What I find most interesting about Los Santos, though, and this can really be said for every city in the Grand Theft Auto series, is that certain aspects that are brought in from real life serve their opposite function within the game. For example, traffic cones and delineators and stop signs aren't placed around the world to give you something to look out for and avoid. They are there for you to run into. Honestly, this is even why pedestrians are around. Grand Theft Auto is a series about ignoring inhibition, of leaning into chaos and giving in to the intrusive thoughts that cross your mind. The things that are there in real life to get us to pay attention and slow down and be safe are meant not just to be ignored in Grand Theft Auto, but to be transgressed. It is a city that looks the same as ones in the real world, but the way players are supposed to engage with it is fundamentally in opposition with how they would in real life. Honestly, I think this is part of why with GTA and other games that take a similar approach to it, people get annoyed that they can't enter every building they come across. While this obviously isn't something most of us would do in the real world, theoretically, you have the ability to break into almost anywhere. So the fact that in a game that is all about theft and destruction of property, most buildings don't have insides you can break into, the absence is noticed. Of course, having interiors for every single building would be a ridiculous use of resources, and the benefits of it would not outweigh the toll it would have on the studio and the game as a whole. But pragmatism aside, not being able to rob any house does still have a slight negative impact on the experience the game is trying to cultivate. All things considered, though, these hiccups that get in the way of crime sprees are pretty few and far between. The city and how it operates is designed to help allow the player to cause as much chaos as they want without many obstacles. Like, roads are bigger relative to cars than they are in the real world, making it easy to swerve between them. Also, despite Los Santos being based on LA, you will never find yourself in a traffic jam. Curbs are low and easy to drive over, exits on the highway are frequent, and places to hide out from the cops during a chase where no one will rat you out are abundant. Like, even Los Santos's demographics play into this. There isn't a single kid in the city. If Rockstar had included them, in order for the game to get a rating, they would have had to go with the Skyrim or Red Dead Redemption 2 route of making them invincible, which would have impeded on the player's ability to be as destructive as they want. So to not get in the way of that, they're just not there at all. The Grand Theft Auto series is meant to feel like a chaotic playground. background, and while on the surface it resembles a real city, the shifts it makes to real things are just enough to allow you to engage with it in a way most people would never and should never in their own life. In contrast to this, in Rockstar's follow-up to GTA V, Red Dead Redemption 2, the design goal seems much more about including things that will enhance the story of Arthur Morgan instead of the gameplay capabilities of the player. It is still a bit of a chaos playground, but by and large, the game wants players to explore Arthur's life and not just use him as an avatar for destruction. While there are choices that do influence who Arthur becomes, there is a distinct story the game is aiming to tell, and almost every aspect of the world plays a role in telling that story. And this is reflected beautifully with the city of Saint Denis. Reaching Saint Denis is a pivotal part of the story for Arthur. Throughout the whole game, the Pinkertons are closing in on the Vanderlyn gang, pushing them into a corner, and Saint Denis is that corner. It represents the way of life they have been rejecting this whole time. Where Novigrad feels similar to the rest of the world of The Witcher 3, just massively compressed, Saint Denis feels like a whole new world altogether. The roads are all paved in stone, trolleys attached to power lines weave through the streets, and smoke from the factories clog the skies. Civilization is creeping into the frontier that Arthur and company has rode and ruled over, and time is starting to run out. It is designed to make you feel equal parts awe and dread as this new way of life starts to take over, and it also aligns thematically with the struggles Arthur is going through during this section of the game. Like, what or who can he trust in this ever-changing world? Who is he if everything he once lived by gets left behind? What does it mean to live a good life? Technically, players can reach Saint Denis whenever they want, but coming by it through the natural progression of the narrative creates a very powerful moment of story aligning with setting. Of course, while I do love when games use the juxtaposition of going from an open expanse to a dense metropolis to hammer home a theme, as it also serves to make the world as a whole feel more cohesive and like it exists beyond the game, there is also something to be said about titles that use their setting to make players feel eternally isolated. Take Cyberpunk 2077. It largely takes place all within Night City, and it sort of does the opposite of Grand Theft Auto 5 in terms of not getting in the player's way. Where Los Santos is simple and quick to navigate, Night City is an utter mess of roads and buildings that barely make sense. There's a really great video by Morphologist where he examines the design of Night City, and one of the major things he talks about there is how it really feels like a product of the setting it takes place within. Cyberpunk as a genre is one where corporations and capitalism are king, and red tape and regulations are for losers. When some industry needs a building or a road or anything really that will help their bottom line, it gets built regardless of its long-term efficacy. Night City is an amalgamation of countless ventures that are barely compatible, making the city itself a nightmare to move through efficiently. And as I brought up with Novigrad, while this creates the desired effect of having players feel lost within and locked into the city, it does risk alienating them whenever they have to move through it. But what's different here is that navigation feeling so sloppy plays into a major theme of the setting, that of overwhelming urban expanse that hardly cares about the people living there. In the scheme of the greater system, you barely are even recognized as a pawn, and the city is almost suffocating because of it. Unlike Novigrad, Night City is not meant to ever be understood, and while you may be able to orient around some major structures and figure out the layout of a few more regularly traveled areas, it is hard to ever break free of the navigational tools the game offers, like the minimap. And for those who watch me a lot, you might assume I think this is a bad thing, but I actually think it works better here than in most titles, as another major aspect of the genre, and this game in particular, is a reliance on tech. It's the main way your character gets upgraded and is a part of who they are, so needing to rely on a minimap to get pretty much anywhere fits in perfectly with this concept. Despite exploration being an element of Cyberpunk 2077's design, it's not what the game really centers around, at least not when compared to something like The Witcher 3. The point of Novigrad's scope is to make searching for Ciri feel like looking for a needle in a haystack, but the point of Night City's scope is to make living within it feel inescapable and heavy, which I imagine is why CD Projekt Red leaned more into creating an incredibly dense and obtruse place instead of one with obvious signposting. The world beyond Night City almost feels impossible, and that's what makes the idea of it so enticing. I think the reason cities in video games pique my interest in a different way than other settings do is because of how layered they need to be to feel realistic. There are so many moving pieces all concentrated in a relatively small space, and that is a harder thing to fake than a village or a cave or a forest. Realism in games is a pretty common talking point, and as graphical capabilities become more robust and mechanical systems more complex, we will keep getting closer and closer to being able to make games that truly simulate more of reality. While I'm sure that there could be an incredible title where you're an inhabitant of a simulated city, one where actions of NPCs change the state of the world, where the locations of things matter in order to keep the city running, where any action you make can interrupt the process of the place you're in, I don't think this kind of dedication to realism will make games better. It sounds good, and in the right context could be good, but for the most part, I don't think it actually would serve most titles. Games are tailored experiences aimed to get players to feel specific ways, and this means creating a reality that is made to make them feel a specific way. And I think that's what players want. They want a city that feels alive and is intuitive to move through. They want one that enhances the core gameplay. They want one that allows them to experiment in ways they never could in real life. They want one that enhances the story being told. Video game cities are weird because if they weren't, they wouldn't support the vision of their respective games. Ultimately, as much as we may say we might, I don't think we really want realism. At least not to its fullest extent. It's limiting, and in the context of video games, often pointless. What I think we actually want, whether it be in relation to cities or any other part of a game, is the illusion of realism. But as recognizing that something is an illusion often breaks the illusion, I guess let's just keep saying we want realism, and maybe we'll believe it.
And while we're doing some pretending, let's pretend like this transition is good. I have a pair of headphones that I really love. My ears have fully adjusted to them, so everything else kind of sounds like trash now. They are what I plan to use for the foreseeable ever, but the downside to them is that they are just headphones. But this video's sponsor, Antlion Audio, has the perfect solution for this problem in the Mod Mic. There are a bunch of different versions of it that might be great for you depending on your needs, but I've been trying out the Mod Mic USB 2 and it's awesome. It sounds great. It's what I'm using to record this right now, and I hope you're well. Big thanks to my patrons who make this channel possible. It really means a lot. With that, I hope you have a great day and or night, and I'll see you in the next one.
7 weird ways you would die in the Dark Ages. Everyone knows about the most common things that would have gotten you killed in the Dark Ages, mainly the plague, and the plethora of other diseases that plagued this time period. No pun intended. But in this video, I'm going to talk about ways to die in the Dark Ages that most people don't even think about. Number 1. Bad eyesight. For most of history, eyeglasses just weren't a luxury that most people had, and considering eyeglasses only became more commonly used in the 14th century, even then it was only affordable for the wealthy. In the Dark Ages, if you were born with bad eyesight, you'd better hope you were born into wealth, as having money would determine whether your eyesight was a minor inconvenience or the cause of your literal demise. You might be asking, how did being rich help you if you were born with bad eyesight? Well, for starters, rich people didn't need to use their eyes nearly as much as the peasants, which might sound ridiculous today, but considering literacy rates were only about 5% back then, wealthy people didn't need good eyesight as much as they need it now. In some rare instances, having bad eyesight was actually helpful to those in the elite class. For example, Queen Elizabeth I was actually short-sighted, and author John Howard actually wrote in his book, The Annals of Queen Elizabeth I, that she was sweet and lively, but short-sighted. Here's the thing, most people didn't know that, and despite this, people are said to have admired her eagerness to be close and personal with her people, which ironically, she only did because she couldn't physically see them until she was close enough to smell them. Now, you didn't have to just be a king or a queen to be able to get by in life with bad eyesight. If you were at least upper middle class and had some access to wealth, your bad eyesight could also be less of an inconvenience because if you had the money, you could simply hire a servant to be your eyes for you. Literally a seeing eye person. Bartholomew, what is that? That's a stick. Bartholomew, what is that? That's a smaller stick. Bartholomew, what is this? That's Oliver. What's an Oliver? Oliver is a peasant. Oh, a poor. Okay, let's keep going. You know, it is so hard for me to see. Ah! But here's the thing. We're talking about most people, not the elites or not the wealthy. In the Dark Ages, wealth was not common. As a medieval peasant, doing manual labor such as plowing the fields while being almost legally blind didn't exactly guarantee your odds of survival. As a medieval peasant in the Dark Ages, almost every job that you were doing to survive included some level of physical strain and danger. And if you take away your sense of sight, your accuracy goes out the window and your chances of accidentally offing yourself go through the roof. Here's a few examples. Going on a night walk and not noticing the pack of wolves stalking you in the bushes. Chopping wood, missing, and cutting your foot off. working as a blacksmith and literally touching anything that's hot, getting a burn injury and having that get infected, eating rancid food or things that aren't even food at all, going on a walk during the day and literally just getting lost because you can't see any landmarks, bumping into the wrong guy with a sword, and of course, being terrible at jousting or even having to go to battle. That already has a basically 0% survivability rate, but I've never heard any stories of any famous blind knights. Next up, we have being born. Life isn't fair, but especially in the Middle Ages, life was even less fair. With an infant mortality rate between 300 and 500 infant deaths per 1,000 births, your chances of getting spawn killed by the Grim Reaper was only a little bit better than a coin flip with Freddy Krueger. To give you some perspective, as of 2024, currently, the worst infant mortality rate in the US is only 5.34 deaths per 1,000 births, or 0.5%. Now, surprisingly, in the Middle Ages, if you lived past childhood, odds were good that you'd live and die in your 60s or even 70s. Like I've mentioned in another one of my videos, the idea that people only lived into their 30s is only a statistic because the infant mortality rate was so high, making the average life expectancy far lower on paper. People didn't die at 30, but almost 50% of people didn't even see the age of 1. To give even more perspective on how bad the infant mortality rate was in the Middle Ages, even if you were born in Afghanistan today, which as of 2020 has the highest infant mortality rate in the entire world, they only have 42 deaths per 1,000 births, or 4.3%. You'd still have a 10 times higher chance of surviving in modern day Afghanistan than you did in medieval Europe. But to add insult to injury, this number also affected the women giving birth in almost equally horrifying numbers. For example, in 1420s Florence, giving birth was responsible for 1 in 5 of all deaths of married women, with one of the main factors contributing to this maternal mortality rate being infection. Not so surprising. They really didn't have the proper medical equipment or knowledge to make childbirth safe for mothers or children in medieval times. And in case this was just not upsetting enough, during this time for women, after they gave birth, they were ordered to remain within their birthing chamber for up to 6 weeks for a period of confinement to, as medieval priests would put it, cleanse themselves. As during this time, it was commonly believed by the masses and religious leaders that a mother's body was made impure by sex and childbirth, which is just wild because, like, dude, how did you think you got here? Wait, sorry, one sec, guys. My head is getting really itchy. I don't think you guys know this, but I actually have a lot of hair. Oh, and if you think the luscious locks on my head are impressive, then you'd probably be surprised by my body hair, too. Now, I know this may be shocking to some of you, and for your sake, I'm gonna shave. Luckily, I have the best help when it comes to personal grooming, and they happen to be today's video sponsor, Manscaped. Okay, now don't skip because I'm gonna make this cool. When you've got kind of. Although the golden age of piracy is considered to be between 1650 and 1720, pirates have been shameless menaces to society for most of recorded human history. What's worse is towards the end of the Dark Ages, governments on both sides of war would actually incentivize pirates by funding their crews in order to use them as ravaging machines of war, essentially turning pirates into mercenaries for hire, and not like in a TF2 kind of way. These state-funded pirates were actually called privateers, and because of these privateers, at the end of the Middle Ages, you probably would have not wanted to be a sailor. That's because most of the time, if you got captured by these pirates and they didn't need you as a slave, you'd most likely just be thrown overboard. But if you were so lucky to be a slave and to not die immediately, well, then you're in for a real treat, because this asshat named Barbossa only used galleys to get around, which is a smart person way of saying big rowboat. And who exactly do you think is going to be rowing Barbossa's boat? That's right, you're a sorry ass, because you didn't realize that this sea menace named Hay-Ridden Barbossa, or as some called him, Redbeard, was going to capture you and your boy Amicus from your merchant vessel and turn you into full-time paddling technicians on a rowboat. I mean, seriously, just imagine getting captured by this fat ginger dude and then being forced to spend the rest of your days rowing around in this oversized rowboat like a damn Oompa Loompa, like you're in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or something. That being said, if you were lucky enough to become a rowboat technician, you'd still need to keep yourself from getting any sort of diseases from the crew, which, if you know anything about pirate living conditions, was practically impossible. Oftentimes, the chains they put around your ankle would dig into your skin, opening up your body for infections almost immediately. Needless to say, it's a good thing this guy wasn't alive to play Sea of Thieves, because he would be an absolute menace. And if you had any ambition of being a medieval sailor, I hope you change your mind. And if all you got from this is now you just want to be a medieval pirate instead of a medieval sailor, just realize that the life of a pirate was not that great. Obscure laws. From the mid-12th century onward, the king began to play a larger and larger role in the administration of justice in England. But before this, the maintenance of law and order was largely the responsibility of local lords and communities. But in the 13th century, local courts became more common. However, before the Pope banned it in 1215, trial by ordeal was the most common method of justice. What is trial by ordeal, you may ask? Basically, they would give you an impossible task and assume that if you were innocent, God would perform a miracle in order for you to not die. I think you get where I'm going with this. There are plenty notable methods of going about this, but one of the most popular examples is trial by fire. A supposed criminal would be asked to walk over 10 feet of red-hot coals, and if their feet weren't burnt at the end of it, they were deemed innocent by the priest. During the witch hunts in medieval Europe, a supposed witch was lowered into water by rope, and if she sank, she was deemed innocent, and if she floated, she was deemed guilty. After this administration of justice, however, laws and trials became more commonplace. Because the king wrote whatever laws he wanted, some of them were pretty random and had harsh sentences. For example, in 1198, one law ordered blinding and castration as a punishment for anybody who got caught hunting venison in the royal forest. This definitely had a chance of getting you killed, since preventing infection was not an easy task in the 13th century. In 1209, court records note that a man named Hugh was accused of doing just this. Petrified, Hugh fled to a church where he remained for a month until he escaped by disguising himself as a woman. Another obscure law that could get you killed had to do with bread. Yes, bread. To reduce competition amongst bakers, in 1266, a law was enacted to ensure that all bakers sold their bread at the same weight. Because breaking this law had potentially serious consequences, most bakers gave their customers extra bread just in case. And if someone was found baking underweight bread, they would be fined. And if they continued to do this, they would be pilloried. For context, this is a pillory. And getting pilloried is when you are in the town square getting, well, hurt. The pillory could get you killed as the crowd's behavior towards you was usually unpredictable. Typically, criminals in the pillory would get rotten eggs, mud, filth, and animal crap thrown at them. But if you caught the crowd on a bad day or said something that pissed them off, or maybe you weren't the nicest baker in the world, they would become violent, hurling stones and bricks at you, which often led to death. That wasn't always the case though, as the crowd's reaction often depended on the context of your crime. For example, in 1703, Daniel Defoe was sentenced to a pillory for causing people to rebel against the state. But because he was regarded as a hero among the crowd, he was pelted with flowers, making his punishment almost nothing. A little bit of a sweet twist there, which is something you don't typically get in a morbid Trust Me Bro video, but enjoy it because it doesn't last long. One last obscure law is the banning of football in medieval England in 1388, which actually brings us to our next point, medieval football. Nowadays, people think rugby is a rough sport. Well, let me tell you what makes rugby look like a relaxing evening at your nana's knitting club. Medieval football, which originally started around the 14th century, was actually known as mob football. And mob football is exactly what it sounds like. See, this wasn't like modern football where there was rules or field and a specific amount of players or even a referee. These games were played in medieval towns and villages with unlimited players on either team. The rules were simple. Get an inflated pig's bladder on your team's side of town by any means possible. And when they say any means, they really meant any means. In fact, the only rules of the game regarding getting the pig's bladder to the other side of town were that you could not commit murder or manslaughter. However, because of this lack of rules and mob mentality, things could easily get crazy, often leading to fights that looked like small-scale wars, groups of people turning on just one person, or people even forgetting where the end zone even was. Although a succession of royals in the 14th century tried to ban it, calling it a common, undignified, and worthless game, peasants just didn't care and kept playing anyway. At this time, the nobility was trying to promote a more civilized sport, archery, which would benefit the king because it was also a useful skill when it came to war times. But mob football, simply put, was far too much fun. It was a concerningly common occurrence to die from the game, either from being trampled to death by your own team or from other accidents. For example, in 1321, it was recorded that one player died from a wound sustained after accidentally running onto a sheathed knife, which is extra dumb because, like, not only are you dying in a game, but you died in a game by running onto a sheathed knife. Like, that's what it has the cover on. Regardless, mob football was a spectacular sport gathering big crowds to watch the games, and the legend even lives on till today. But nowadays, people don't really die. They just get millions of dollars and traumatic brain injuries. Witchcraft. Specifically, practicing witchcraft. In the Middle Ages, people often think of witches when they hear of witchcraft, which makes sense, but there is specific terms for men who practice witchcraft as well. Maleficio, Wicca, or warlocks. This comes from the Latin term maleficium, which was considered to be sorcery or witchcraft that was conducted in the intention of causing harm. A lot of people don't really understand the context of witches and witchcraft in the time period. Back then, witches and sorcerers weren't like your crazy ex from university who you broke up with because they peed on your bed and they told you they were going to cast a love spell on you. Witches in the medieval ages were not only highly respected, but also highly feared. When you think about the 14th century, you have to remember how much power the church had. Belief in God, spirits, and demons was taken as a given. So when somebody said that they were able to cast a spell on you or send a demon your way, that was a serious and scary threat. And because of the Catholic power structure, when you openly opposed God as a witch, you were deemed as opposing the entire state itself. Although there are different words for both genders, the most common theme of both is that they were both considered occultists or sorcerers. Sorcerers were seen as somebody who tried to reshape the world through the occult. Now, how did they do this? Basically, every once in a while, someone came along who made a spectacular claim about the spirit world, and they had received perceived credibility, claiming that it had something to do with Solomon from the Bible. This happened because someone once wrote a book labeled The Testament of Solomon, which claimed that King Solomon from the Bible enslaved particular demons to help build his temple. The only problem with this claim is that this book was written many centuries after King Solomon from the Bible died. Another example of this is a book translated from Latin known as the Book of the Offices of Spirits, or the book called Empto by King Solomon, about a prince and kings of demons. Strangely enough, this book is mostly only known through references. Neither the original copy nor the author ever have been found. Within these books, there are instructions on how to work with specific demons that were actually mentioned in the Bible to carry out evil deeds on your behalf. With this context, it makes more sense why the entire medieval population hunted witches at one point. It's because people were scared of them. And to make things worse, anything bad that happened to them was blamed on someone supposedly practicing witchcraft. For example, if something bad happened to John that could not be readily explained, and John felt like Richard disliked him, John may have suspected Richard of causing him harm by occult means, aka witchcraft. In fact, the most common suspicions that you might be a witch were livestock, crops, storms, disease, and even sexual dysfunction. So basically, if someone didn't like you and something bad happened to them, you could easily be proclaimed a witch. In total, tens or hundreds of people were executed and others were imprisoned, tortured, banished, and had their lands and possessions confiscated. So yeah, practicing witchcraft could have definitely gotten you killed. And even if you didn't practice witchcraft, the simple hysteria of it all could easily have gotten you killed as well. Following witchcraft, we have a semi-similar topic, alchemy. Alchemy started in the Middle Ages, and some say it is actually a precursor to modern chemistry. At the heart of medieval alchemy is the belief that all matter was composed of 4 elements: earth, air, fire, and wind. And with the right combination of elements, any substance on earth could be formed. Alchemists believed that the transmutation of one substance into another was possible, and that's how the stereotype of alchemists trying to turn lead into gold came to be. What many people didn't know, however, was that alchemists were also trying to create an all-powerful elixir to cure disease and make anyone who drinks it immortal. This required finding the Philosopher's Stone, an elusive substance that was believed to, quote, make possible an elixir of immortality and transmutation of substances into gold. So how exactly could alchemy kill you? It seems like it could only make you stronger, right? Well, the problem with alchemists is they had no idea what they were doing. You see, these weren't scientists of the modern day who put their medicines through clinical trials and testing. Back then, if you could make a metal drinkable, they would have given it to you and called it an elixir of immortality. For example, in Chinese alchemy, the official 24 histories record numerous Chinese emperors, nobles, and officials who died from taking elixirs to prolong their lifespans. This is because the elixirs of immortality they drank were just concoctions of toxic metals and minerals such as mercury and arsenic. Flash forward a few hundred years, and Iranian chemists discovered how to make gold dissolve in liquid, which was later dubbed royal water. The formula developed was a mixture of nitric and hydrochloric acid that could dissolve pure gold and produce gold chloride. It would then be mixed into water to create a drinkable form of gold. Alchemists up until the Middle Ages continuously made claims that drinking gold had incredible effects, calling it a elixir of life and the perfect element. They even claimed that consuming it would make your body indestructible and cure all illnesses. Despite these absolutely wild claims, even the newest formulas for drinkable gold elixirs up until the end of the Middle Ages had the same problem. It was highly toxic, highly corrosive, caused profuse salivation, chronic urination, increased sweating, the gold fever, and worst of all, kidney damage. So unlike witchcraft, practicing alchemy wouldn't get you killed. However, being the customer of an alchemist definitely would. Bonus, yeah, there's actually 8, not 7. This one's just silly, so it's kind of short. Spontaneous human combustion. Yeah, you heard that right. Spontaneous human combustion is incredibly rare, yet documented and a proven phenomenon throughout history. What is it, you may ask? Well, basically, it's when a human spontaneously combusts into flames and dies. The only catch is the fire is not started from an external source, which is where the mystery comes from. Some theories about how this fire could have been ignited internally come from alcohol consumption or excessive body fat. In ancient times, officials would often explain these occurrences with the supernatural or God's judgment. This one's kind of silly, but I thought you'd like it. Well, there you have it. Now you know about 7 unusual ways to die if you were alive in the Middle Ages. To conclude this episode, I'll summarize my key points into one simple sentence. If you ever go back to the Dark Ages, never go on a cruise or a pirate ship. Study every single law that is passed in your area. If someone asks you if you want to play football, don't do it. Don't trust witches or alchemists or drink elixirs, even if the king drank it, or be a witch or a sorcerer or a king who has an alchemist, or make sure that you are not born with bad eyesight, spontaneously combusting into flames, or even born at all. And there you have it, bros. It's that easy. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to watch another history-based video, check out this video about what it was like to be rich in every time period. And as always, trust me, bro.